Imagine trying to get a concealed carry permit, only to be told you're not eligible. Hard to believe. It was a reality in states like New York and California, where gun owners were often denied permits based on subjective standards. This wasn't just an isolated issue. It was part of a larger, long-standing debate on Second Amendment rights. But now, everything has changed. A landmark U.S. Supreme Court ruling has shaken up gun laws nationwide, and the implications for gun owners are profound. If you're a gun owner, or you plan to be one, this is information you need to hear today. We're diving into the Supreme Court's game-changing 6-3 decision on concealed carry laws. Part 1. The case behind the ruling. The case that brought us to this turning point was New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus Bruen. The case centered around New York's concealed carry law, which had been in place for over a century. For the majority of that time, it was incredibly difficult for residents to legally carry a concealed weapon in public. The state's law required applicants to demonstrate a valid reason, such as being stalked or facing a specific threat, in order to be granted a permit. But this law raised a fundamental issue. Self-defense was not seen as a good enough reason for most citizens to carry a concealed weapon. The law didn't allow for general self-defense concerns. It required a specific, documented threat. The law had been challenged multiple times over the years, but it wasn't until 2022 that the Supreme Court took the issue head-on. The plaintiffs in the case argued that the law was unconstitutional because it violated the Second and 14th Amendments of the U.S. Constitution. They argued that Americans should have the right to carry firearms for self-defense, without needing to prove a heightened risk of danger. The Supreme Court agreed, ruling 6-3 in favor of the plaintiffs and striking down the New York law as unconstitutional. This decision not only invalidated the New York law, but also set a legal precedent for other states with similar restrictions. Part 2. What the Supreme Court's ruling means. The Supreme Court's ruling was clear. If a law infringes on your Second Amendment rights, it must be rooted in the Constitution's text, history, and tradition. In other words, the government cannot just impose new restrictions on gun ownership based on what lawmakers believe is reasonable or necessary. The law must be in line with the way guns were regulated during the early days of America. Justice Clarence Thomas, writing for the majority, emphasized that the Second Amendment was not meant to be a privilege, granted only to certain people who could prove they were at risk. Rather, it was a right for all Americans. This was a bold statement that challenged how gun laws had been interpreted in the U.S. for many decades. The court's decision wasn't just about New York. It was a direct challenge to the May issue system that had been in place in several other states, such as California, New Jersey, and Maryland. Before the ruling, these states had laws that gave local authorities the discretion to grant or deny concealed carry permits based on vague and subjective criteria. In practice, this meant that many people were denied permits simply because they couldn't prove they were at a specific risk. The Supreme Court's decision sent a message to these states. They could no longer create laws that made it difficult for law-abiding citizens to carry a firearm for self-defense. Part 3. The Ripple Effect. Across the nation. After the Supreme Court's ruling, many states with restrictive concealed carry laws faced significant pressure to change their laws. The ruling effectively pushed them toward adopting a shall-issue system, which means that if applicants meet basic requirements, such as passing a background check and completing a training course, they must be granted a permit. There is no longer room for subjective decision-making by local officials. But the ruling didn't automatically fix all the issues. While many states have made efforts to comply with the ruling by easing restrictions, others have fought back by passing new laws that create additional barriers. For instance, some states have imposed extended waiting periods for permit approval higher fees, and more complicated training programs. Some have also designated sensitive locations where concealed carry is still restricted, including places like parks, schools, bars, and public transportation hubs. In states like New York, the ruling led to the creation of new legal frameworks that attempted to make it more difficult to carry a concealed weapon. These new laws designated certain public spaces as sensitive areas, where carrying a firearm would still be illegal. Critics argue that these restrictions are so broad that they undermine the intent of the Supreme Court's decision, making it virtually impossible for some permit holders to legally carry their firearms in public. Despite these obstacles, the ruling has already had a major impact on how concealed carry laws are applied across the country. In states like Texas, Arizona, and Tennessee, which already had strong Second Amendment protections, the ruling hasn't changed much. These states already had straightforward systems in place, allowing citizens to carry firearms without the additional bureaucratic hurdles. But for people living in more restrictive states, the ruling has been a game changer. Part 4. The Legal Test, History and Tradition. One of the most important aspects of the Supreme Court's ruling is the new legal test it introduced for evaluating gun laws. Moving forward, courts will need to ask a very specific question when reviewing any gun law. Does the regulation align with the original text of the Constitution? And does it reflect the historical tradition of gun regulation in early America? This new standard is a shift away from using modern concerns about public safety and current policy preferences as the basis for gun laws. Instead, judges must look to historical precedents from the 1700s and 1800s to determine whether a law restricting firearms is constitutionally sound. This means that laws regulating things like magazine capacity, firearm bans, or restrictions on where people can carry must be backed by clear historical examples from the founding era. If they aren't, the law could be struck down. Already, we're seeing how this legal test is impacting the courts. Several federal courts have struck down modern gun laws, including restrictions on magazine capacity and limits on firearm transportation, because they could not find any equivalent laws from the founding era. This new framework, known as Text, History, and Tradition, is reshaping how the Second Amendment is applied across the country, and it's already having a tangible impact on legal challenges to gun laws. Part 5. Everyday gun owners. What's changed? For most gun owners living in states with strong Second Amendment protections, like Texas or Arizona, the Supreme Court's ruling might not make much of a difference. These states already have permissive gun laws that make it easy for responsible citizens to carry firearms. However, for gun owners living in more restrictive states, the ruling is a game changer. If you live in a state with strict concealed carry laws, you no longer have to prove why you deserve a permit. If you meet the basic requirements, like passing a background check and completing the necessary training, you are entitled to a permit. This opens the door for thousands of gun owners who were previously denied the right to carry due to vague or subjective standards. However, not all states have accepted this change. Some are creating new barriers to make it harder for people to carry firearms. These barriers include additional background checks, more paperwork, and longer waiting periods. While these changes are being challenged in the courts, the battle for gun rights is far from over. Part 6. What comes next? This Supreme Court decision is not the end of the battle for Second Amendment rights. It's just the beginning of a new chapter. Following this ruling, courts across the country will be forced to re-examine a wide range of gun regulations, from restrictions on magazine capacity to mandatory waiting periods for purchasing firearms. In states like California and New Jersey, we're already seeing how the legal framework is changing as courts strike down laws that don't align with the new standard. We expect to see more challenges to laws that limit gun ownership, including assault weapon bans, magazine capacity limits, and restrictions on carrying firearms in certain locations. As these cases move through the legal system, courts will continue to define the boundaries of the Second Amendment, and we may see further changes that will reshape the gun laws of tomorrow. Part 7. Staying informed and involved. The media will continue to spin every court case, every headline, and every ruling to create fear, confusion, and doubt. But it's more important than ever to stay informed. Being a responsible gun owner today means more than just knowing how to handle a firearm. It means understanding the laws, knowing your rights, and being prepared to act when your freedom is tested. If you want to protect your rights, you need to stay engaged and be ready to fight for your Second Amendment protection support organizations like Gun Owners of America, the Firearms Policy Coalition, and the Second Amendment Foundation, who are working to defend our rights in court. Share real information with your friends and family, and help others understand what is happening in the world of gun rights. When we stay informed and involved, we can make a difference and ensure our rights are preserved for future generations. Before we wrap up, let me hear from you. Do you think this ruling was long overdue? Has your state changed its process or added new restrictions since the ruling? Drop a comment below, and let's keep the conversation going. If you found this video helpful, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to understand their rights. If you want to stay updated on changes to firearm laws, real-world gear, and carry options, make sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.